Number 5. Chain the ships together. The war was Han's dynasty's civil war, and the leader was General Cao Cao. Admittedly, this time the general in question fell for a trick. Instead of ordering something stupid, that was his own idea. But even the enemy general must have been face-palming when they found out it worked. The situation was the two warlords in southern China were rebelling, and Prime Minister General Cao Cao was sent with an army now estimating at 220,000 soldiers to put the rebellion down. While initially successful, Cao Cao ran into trouble when the enemy retreated to ships. His army needed to transfer from ground warfare to naval without much training, and the enemy noticed he had moored his ships closely together to decrease pitching and avoid sinkiness. They sent a pretend traitor named Pang Tong over to advise Cao Cao that he tie his ships together to avoid sickness. When he fell for it, ships on fire well sealed into his fleet also started burning the other ships. A disaster for the loss of Han dynasty and the war. Number 4. Abandon the high ground. The war was the American Civil War. The leader, General Joseph Hooker. It was the day before the Battle of Chancellorsville. The Northern Army had 134,000 men. The Southern Army 60,000 men. The Southerns were effectively surrounded with 75,000 behind them and the rest in front of the army. Not only that, but the Northern Army in the rear had the high ground and effectively controlled the field. But just before they could attack and completely destroy the Southern Army, Hooker apparently completely lost his nerve and ordered his army to fall back. Most ridiculously, he ordered the soldiers off the high ground. General George Meade, whose soldiers had been stationed there, and who would be the next commander of the army in time of the famous Battle of Gettysburg, said of the order, "My God, if we cannot hold the top of the hill, certainly we will not be able to hold the bottom of it." As a result, when the Southerns attacked instead, they were able to get their cannons onto the high ground, and even though they were badly outnumbered, they managed to partially rout Hooker's army and win a battle they had absolutely no right. Number 3. We're fighting firing range! Halt! The war of 1912-1914. The leader, General Edward Pakenham. The Battle of New Orleans became famous for both happening 2 weeks after the end of the war and for making Andrew Jackson the reputation they would get him elected president. The battle itself was mostly British soldiers attacking American entrenchments and being repulsed, with ridiculously disappropriate casualties being suffered. The most ridiculous example of this was the 1903 Southern Highlanders resident was about to attack some breastworks, but then a halt was called. While the regiment was within range of the enemy's rifle, so the regiment was mowed down without so much of being given orders to fire. One of the Americans claimed that watching the enemy just stand there without being shot down drove him to tears. Number 2. In the crater. The war was the American Civil War and the War of the 1962. Also the American Civil War. The leader was General Ambrose Burnside. Burnside's second dumbest order in the Civil War took place in the Battle of the Crater. It was very near the end of the Civil War, when the main Northern and Southern armies were dug into trenches outside of the city Richmond, Virginia. They ultimately would be entrenched for 10 months. In an effort to shorten the amount of spell, ingenious engineers suggested building a long tunnel to under the southern positions and loading it with dynamite. This went off perfectly well, and a large hole was blown onto the southern defense. But then, true to form, Burnside bungled it by ordering his soldiers into a huge crater, so the soldiers jumped into a hole too deep for them to climb back out of, and Southern reinforcements were rushed to the crater. The commanding general, Ulysses Grant, said, "A great opportunity to take an enemy position I have ever seen." Burnside was permanently stripped of his rank, and by this point, even he must have been a sign of relief.
Number 1.
Nap time. The war was the Mexican-Texan War. In the year was 1836. The leader was dictator Santa Anna. Whoa. We returned to Mexico to a time before Texas was part of the United States of America. On April the 19th, a Mexican army of several thousands under Santa Anna in a village called San Jacinto had just been cut off from reinforcements by the Texan army, destroying a bridge in its rear. The army then moved to surround the Mexicans. Despite being cut off, Anna had ordered his army to take its unusual 3:30 siesta. This allowed the Texans, despite being outnumbered, to completely destroy them and then take them by surprise. Anna, having forgotten to even post sentries, this allowed the Texans to inflict over 600 casualties while suffering only 13. So low they must have started to feel sorry for the Mexicans halfway through. Among the Mexicans captured was Santa Anna himself. Despite shedding his uniform, he was identified by being saluted by his soldiers in his silk underwear. From singing a humiliating treat where he agreed that all Mexican armies would retreat, thus allowing Texas to become a sovereign nation. Still, no reason to skip a good siesta. Sources: Wikipedia.